Welcome to video 2 of 3. In this video we'll be using your new knowledge of Adobe Premiere Rush user interface and looking at editing the content on the timeline. You'll be starting on page 8 of your handout. Let's head into Rush now. Okay, so now we're in Rush. So if we head down to the timeline, it has been populated for us with all the media assets being automatically added. But with this there'll be lots of clips that we don't want, or we might want to trim out bits. So let's first have a look at how we would trim a clip. So here's this clip here. I would play it to watch it. And then to trim it I can simply move in the edges to get rid of the start and the finish. And now that clip is shorter. Now if you want to remove something that's in the middle of the clip, you may need to split it so to be able to get to the middle of it. So to do that you'd place the playhead where you'd want to see this bit is blurry, so here, over here are some scissors. That lets me split my clip, so that now has become 2. And now I have these edges that I can trim by simply moving outside. I can always get the original back. Just watch your audio doesn't also trim itself and you lose parts of it when you do that. So we've looked at trimming and we've looked at splitting. You can also duplicate a clip. So over here we've got this plus button. So now I've got 2 versions of that. You don't really use that too often, but I just wanted to show you that. And then if you wanted to delete it, you've got this very easy to use delete button. So as you work your way along your footage on your timeline, you will probably want to rearrange the order. So to do that you click on a clip and you simply drag it and drop it to a new location. You can place it on top, remembering that the clips on top will be what is seen and what is underneath won't be. Or if you want to put it after a clip, you simply put it in between and the next one will move along. And that's how you rearrange your clips. So another way to edit is to make it a bit cleaner, and that is to delete everything off your timeline. So now I've got a fresh new timeline. And what I'll do is I'll head to my bin where all my assets are saved, and I can add them one by one in the order that I want. That might be a nicer way for you to work. So when we're in our bin, these are all our media assets, and you can see if I hover over a clip I can scrub through the footage. So as I'm trying to quickly decide which clips I'm going to use and which I'm not, I can scrub through like that. If I want to use it, I can click on it and go add, and it will add it to the timeline. I can also just drag it straight down. What I can also do though is I can click on these 3 dots. It again lets me add it to the timeline, but if I click this open, it gives me this mini editing area where I can edit this clip on its own. So if I play it, I can watch it all here. And I can decide that actually I only want to bring in this section, and with that then I go add, and you can see it's added it to the timeline, but it's a slightly shorter version. All the original media is still there, it's just you've done a little edit there. So if we click back, we'll try and add something else. To add multiple, you simply click and you'll get numbers, and you can see you can go add 3, and all 3 will be added in the order you clicked. Down here you can filter what's in your bin to find things easier. If you're looking for a music track, you can sort them by name also. So that is your bin. Another thing is, I mentioned it earlier and it's slightly advanced, but when I'm clicked on a clip like this and I want to edit, this new icon appears down here, which is new sequence. So if I decided I wanted to make a second sequence, that would be where I created that second sequence. So I'm just going to call it sequence 2. And now in my bin I have a sequence 2 and a sequence 1, which we're currently working on. So I can see I'm in sequence 1 up here, but don't get too worried about that. That's just something that you can do later on when you decide when you're going to make adjustments, if you get some feedback that you might want to do a second sequence. Also, when you at the very beginning and you're adding media with the plus sign, when you are looking at clips to add, you have this little square here, and that also brings up that sort of editing function. And if you click on this plus button, you get an add option, and that will add it to your bin. Now we have our heads around how to actually physically add and arrange clips. Let's think about what will set your video apart. And one of those things is storytelling. So when you are choosing parts of the clips and arranging them, we need to think about how it will all tie together. You might do that by thinking about a video you have seen and that you've liked, and how they told their story. Maybe the music will dictate where certain clips go. Maybe if there's a person speaking, what clips will show will be prompted by the words that they say. Then often video editing isn't in isolation, so a lot of the time people will have planned their shots before they're captured. But like anything, good things take time, and your storytelling and editing will improve with practice. You need to remember duration and orientation, so think about where your final video will be going. If it's social media, you probably want to be making a shorter video, perhaps a square or vertical video. So decide on those things at the start so you don't waste time doing additional editing that you don't need, or editing something in the wrong shape that you need it. Earlier we added music to the bin and added it to the timeline. It's just like adding a clip, except on the timeline the music will be on the lower half of the timeline where all the audio lives. When choosing music, think about the beat. You want to have some variation in your music, so the song isn't monotonous and therefore makes the video dull. But you also don't want a repetitive beat or a loud drum kick that is distracting from what someone is saying or what the visuals are trying to say. When you decide on the order and length of your clips, then try and let the beats of the music dictate when the cut of the clip is. In Adobe Rush they do offer some free soundtracks, which is really cool. I will just jump back into Rush and show you where those are. So if I go to Add Media, and I go here, and I go to Media Browser, I get all these options to add media from. If I go to the section here which says Rush Soundtracks, there are a couple of music tracks, free music tracks that I can use. So if I click on it, it's going to edit, but to listen to it, if I click on that little square, I can play and listen to it and decide if I like it. Another thing you want to look at is how long the music clip is. With music you can edit and then you can chop it up and move the front section to the end section and things like that, but if you want to keep it simple you might just want to have one track throughout. If your video is going to be 3 minutes, then you want to make sure you have a track that is 3 minutes, otherwise you might need 2 tracks. So to get back, I just click on that square again. To listen to another one, I click on this little square. Okay, so that's how I'm listening to it. Say I did like it, I would then just go plus, it says add, it goes add, and then I can see it's down on my timeline, and if I'm in my bin I will see that that music track's been added. If I filter and go audio only, I now have the music I brought in and the free soundtrack option here. So now it's time for an activity. I'd like you to review the free music options that we just looked at and add your chosen music clip to the timeline. It can be one of the soundtracks or the one that you chose earlier. Arrange your video clips on the timeline and delete all the clips and add clips one at a time from the bin, or trim and arrange your clips on the timeline, whatever works for you. But have a go at using all the different options we've looked at so far and getting used to Adobe Premiere Rush. So now you're feeling a little bit more comfortable with the timeline. Let's take a look at the audio options. So we'll jump back into Adobe Premiere Rush to do that. Right, so here we're back in the editing interface. So remember I said with the timeline you've got the visuals on top, and then the bottom half is where audio lives. And earlier I quickly showed you, I click on this button, expands out any synced audio, and I can see these don't have any because there's no waveforms. But if I add some of those drone shots that I do know have audio, we will start to hear and see. So there's the waveforms and hear the very loud audio. So let's close this bin. So to see your waveforms and not see them, you click on this. And then I recommend you keep this open so that you can see your multiple tracks, so that when you have your audio you can see all your different audio that you have. So you might use this track for a music track, you might have a sound effect here, and then you might have a narration here. It's quite cool how many different tracks they give you to work with. So then up in the section over here where we have all the adjustments, we have the audio section. I've got it open already. To open it I just click on this little icon here, and to see all the options I need to make sure that I'm clicked on a clip with audio, and then you can see I have the option to adjust the volume of the audio in that clip. So if I drop it right down, now very quiet, or I can simply hit mute. You can see that the waveforms have been grayed out. There are a couple of advanced options, but I wouldn't worry about them too much. Now with this clip you can see as I play it, there's a little meter over here. Now with the meter, it's just a guideline as to how loud you want your clip. So at the moment it's showing green with a little bit of yellow. That's probably a good level. If you go too high, hear your ears here, or higher, you'll see that a little bit of red started to show, and red is bad. In TV or in production you have to be really careful about meeting certain sound levels because you can hurt people's ears. And like if you send off a show for broadcast, if it's too loud they'll send it back. So those meters are just to help you make your volume a certain level so that people will like it when they hear it. But don't worry too much. Basically you want to keep it at just a normal listening. If it's hurting your ears then it's probably too loud. So to add a narration, it's really easy. You just need to find an empty audio track, and here you have a little microphone that you can tap on. This will let you have a record option, and then you need to find where in your video you want to place your narration, and then you click record. It will count you down, and now you talk to your picture like I am doing right now. So in this shot I'm holding a pen, I'm talking to a crowd, I'm waving my pen around, the camera is moving. So here I've got my narration track. I'm probably not likely to move it around too much because it is speaking to the picture. I can now see that it is in my media assets, and if I want to delete it for any reason I can just hit delete there. It's going to say it's in my sequence, so I'm just going to delete it from there and delete it from there. You can also delete clips by simply clicking delete on your keyboard. That's another handy tip. So now let's look at the crop and rotate functions up here in the adjustment section. So you'll see this little crop icon. So this lets me adjust my visual here in the preview. So I can move the horizontal position, vertical position, rotation. If I want to reset any of that, I can go like that. This will come in really handy when you are working with maybe a different orientation and you need to position your shot within a square or something like that. Let's go back to landscape. You can also scale your footage, which is really good. Just be careful if you scale it up that you don't get your shot becoming pixelated. I encourage you to maintain proportions ticked. And then we have the advanced section, which lets me crop, which if you wanted to have that sort of black bars look, you can get it like that. That's a really cool feature. Some of the other beginners software doesn't have that. You can also in here change the opacity of your clip, so that is good if you maybe have a logo that you don't want to be 100% sitting on top of another clip, and you've got edge feather, which I wouldn't use if I was you, but it's there if you want to. Now I just want to show you how that sort of works with, let's say, a logo. So I'm going to put this logo on top of this clip. So I want the logo to show, so it has to be above the clip. Now you can see at the moment it's way too big, so I can scale down the size of that, and then if I want it to the side I can move it to the side and like that, and things like that. And like I said, you could change the opacity so it's actually quite light. So say I want it up in the corner, I would go like that and then scale it down and move it. The other way you can do it is you double click on the image or the clip, and then you actually get these blue bars, which is a lot easier to move, and you can see that the toggles are moving as I do that. So that's really cool for doing like logos like I've just shown you, but also when you do that sort of picture on picture type look where, you know, in training videos you might have someone talking to camera, speaking here, and then what they're talking about is on screen here. Also quite common for gaming videos where the gamers are talking here and then their screenplay is showing here. One thing that is currently missing from Adobe Premiere Rush is if you have stills in your video, they don't have a Ken Burns effect. So up in this crop, yeah, I can position it where I want, but we know in videos when they have the still image slightly increasing in size over the time, like it goes like this within the video, you can't do that in Adobe Rush, which is a bit of a shame. I know I've seen on community boards where people have requested that, so possibly by the time you are using it they might have that feature available, but adding motion to still clips like that is just a nice little feature to have, because a still clip can look quite jarring if it's in between moving footage. You can see how that looks kind of weird from going moving to still to moving. But hopefully, yeah, that will be coming soon. You can also make adjustments to speed with Adobe Premiere Rush. Now I'm recording this on my desktop, and the version of Rush on my desktop doesn't actually have the speed icon available, but I will jump across to my laptop version which will have that option, and I'll show you what we can do with speed there. So here we are on my laptop, and because of that my cursor looks different. The audio might sound a bit different too, but also over here this looks a bit different because we now have a speed adjustment available. So if I click on this, what it allows me to do is I've got a clip highlighted here, and then I can select a range of the clip that I want to adjust the speed. So if I want to adjust just the second half, I can move that like that. And then here is where I actually change the speed. So every clip that comes in is just at what we call normal speed, which is 100%. So if you go faster, you increase the speed above 100%, and what happens is your clip becomes shorter on the timeline. So yeah, obviously you'd choose a clip where it's nice and interesting. So maybe if you're skateboarding and you do a trick, you might want to speed up the bit where you turn around. Likewise if it's a ballet move or something like that. And then again, if you go below 100%, making the clip slower. So on the timeline it's got longer. And if we play this, you start to get a more filmic look. Of course we're working with a really raw clip here, so it looks a bit weird. The other thing you can do is you can ramp the speed adjustment, and what that does is it just sort of eases in the change in speed and eases it out. So you can play around with that over here as well. So that is how you can adjust speed with Adobe Premiere Rush and add a little bit of interest to your video. To get out of speed, you simply just click on that adjustment option again, and there you have it. So let's continue on looking at all the adjustments that you can make in Adobe Premiere Rush. We're going to talk now about transitions, color, and some titles. So let's jump back into Rush. Okay, so we're here in Rush again. So to do transitions, we go up to the icon here, we click on it, and you'll see a couple of options here. Now Rush doesn't have a ton of options. Some of the other beginner software have a lot more, and the advanced software does too, but you've got a couple of the main ones here. Cross dissolve, it is when it blends two shots together. So transitions usually are for between two clips or at the beginning or very end of a video. So to apply this cross dissolve, I place it in between two clips, and now you can see there's a transition there, and if I play this, you can see that there was a slight sort of blurring of the two shots as they're combined with the cross dissolve. If I double click on it, you can see I get the option to change the duration of that cross dissolve. You can see it's much bigger, so the effect will be a lot more obvious. So that I get that option when I click on edit, or if I double click on the actual transition. So I click on presets. Let's look at some of the other options that there are. There's dip to black and dip to white. So say some videos, they will have that look where there's sort of a black moment between clips. You can do that by just actually leaving a gap between your clips normally, but these beginner softwares usually sort of auto connect your shot, so you don't always get that option. So this dip to black lets you have that effect. Again, I can make that a bit more obvious, like that. And it sort of helps you to sort of fade in and fade out things as well. Now, one thing I will say about transition is to try not to overdo them. It's usually a sign of a beginner editor when every shot has a transition in between. Just use them sparingly, use them to sort of maybe hide a jump cut or to fade in or fade out something, like a logo or maybe a music track. Yeah, they become very repetitive if you use them between every single shot. Now if I want to delete this transition, I just click on it and I can click delete on my keyboard, or if I go back up here, add this transition here and then hit the little rubbish bin over there, it's gone. So if you like Instagram sort of filters, you'll like the next section where we've got some sort of visual presets. So if I need to be clicked on a clip to sort of view them, so at the moment I've got no sort of filter on, but I can apply any of these to get a different sort of look. And with these you can click edit to sort of change the intensity of that look. So say I go back to none and I just wanted to make simple color adjustments like exposure. If it's a really dark shot, I can change the exposure here. Remember, you can click reset up here if you don't like what you've done. You've got shadows, highlights. Anyone who does a lot of photography editing will be familiar with these sort of terms. Temperature is a good one to know because sometimes with beginner, actually with any sort of level videographer, sometimes your footage can be a little bit blue, a little bit orange because the settings weren't quite right for the lighting. So if your shot looks a little bit blue, then you should try and counter that by making it a little bit warmer. Likewise, if it's a bit orange, counter it by adding a little bit of blue. You've also got vibrance and saturation, which is a good one because that gives you that black and white look if you want it. And then there are a couple other advanced things, but probably best just to stick to the basics. So lastly, let's look at titles. So let's click up here in the adjustment section. It brings up some title options. Say I want to use this one. I click on it and I drag it down. So titles go on top of your footage. And if I double click on it, I can change what it says. And I have the flexibility to change the font, the style, the size, and spacing and things. To change the color, I click on this, but you need to make sure you actually clicked on the word. What you can't change is the position of the title. I can change the size, but I can't move it up there, which is a bit of a shame. So you need to select the style, the placement here. So say I wanted to do one where it's sort of lower thirds. These are good for naming someone that's speaking. Put their name there and their company there. You need to choose a lower third option. Again, you have the edit options. So this one you can change the options for this top title, and then the subtitle, the options are here. This one here has a background. So I've got my title, and then if I edit it, it has this shape here, and I can change the shape so it gives me sort of more of a full screen title look. In an updated version of Rush, the one that I have on my laptop, there's actually a solid background option, so that lets you do a whole solid color. So I'm back using my laptop version of Adobe Premiere Rush, and with this one, if I go to the titles, it lets me see a solid background option. So if I scroll down, I
find it. I could have also typed solid background up here. So I'm going to click on that and drag it. So there you go. So now I've got, and if I wanted to change the color, I'd go Edit, Shape, Color Fill, and select the color of my choice. And then I'm probably not going to just want a solid block of color like that. I'll probably want to put a title on, so be careful not to click on the title as it will change what you've just done. Instead, get your new title and drop it on top. And then you can change the duration to fit the one below it. So now you'll have this title like that. And just like before, to actually change the words, you double click on the letters and you type out what you need. So that's how you would get a solid background title. Really good for like introducing a question or a new segment. I wouldn't recommend putting a solid title at the beginning of your video just because it's a little bit boring, especially if it's going on social media, but if it's for education or training purposes, then that might work really well. To get out of this, I just click on title again, and there we go.
And then there's a couple of motion titles which are quite cool. There's this one, for instance, where you see that line has some motion to it, so it gives it some movement, which is quite nice. So there's a few options there for you. Now I want to talk about some advanced options really quickly. So earlier when we were in the crop tool, I showed you how to add some black bars. If you want to go for that sort of film look where they add the black bars. When you get a bit more advanced, you could also think about adding lens flares. You see these in videos where there's sort of like a light flash on the screen. You have to have a software that lets you import an external light flare though. I don't believe Rush lets you do that, but definitely Premiere Pro. You can buy lens flares and then you add that effect on top of your footage. Another term you might hear is adjustment layers. This is when you add a layer on top of your footage and you apply the changes to just the adjustment layer, so you're not actually impacting the footage below, but that is really getting quite advanced. Motion titles are big in the world of video. I have shown you that in the presets there are a couple of options, but you are quite limited, so you really need to be sort of moving up to the more advanced editing to be able to do all those fancy titles. But at least you have options here to change your size, your colour, and things like that. And then another term you might hear in the editing world is keyframes. This comes into effect a lot with sort of animation and motion, where you have the visual at one position at the first keyframe, at the second keyframe you've moved the position, so therefore movement is created. But all of this is very advanced, don't worry about it too much, just get used to playing around with Premiere Rush, experimenting. You can make really effective, engaging videos with this tool. Great, so now we have learnt about all the adjustment options in Adobe Premiere Rush. I want you to do an activity and practice what we've just learnt. So why don't you try and add a main title to your video, a lower third, and also a logo. I'd also like you to experiment with the other adjustments like the transitions and colour and speed and things like that to complete your video. So that brings us to the end of video 2. Let's move on into video 3.